Hello again. Welcome back to Print Island and me, Richard Askam, here in the Lighthouse. It's a little bit hot in the Lighthouse today. We're in the middle of summer. Unfortunately, the Lighthouse has turned into a greenhouse. The downside of having a 360-degree view of the industry is there's a lot of glass involved. So I've got the fan. You can obviously see my hair blowing in the wind, or where it used to be, certainly. And I'm joined today by my good friend from the US, Jim Raffel. Hey, Jim.
Hi, Rich. How are you doing today?
I'm all right, thank you. Yeah, surviving the summer heat wave, like I think we all are. You forget, don't you, that and especially in the UK, particularly, we don't get sort of these extremes of weather. You guys are a bit more used to it than me.
Well, and I think we have better air conditioning.
There you go. That's what it is. That's what we're missing. So, amongst many other things, aircon is what we need. So, we're digressing. That's no problem at all. Listen, Jim, thank you for taking the time for joining me here on Print Island. And I'm sure everybody knows who you are, but for anybody that doesn't, give us the elevator pitch of Jim Raffel.
Well, I appreciate your confidence. Everyone knows who I am, but I'll fill in anyway. So my name's Jim Raffel, and I've been in the industry about 4 decades. I have a degree in printing management from RIT going back that far, and then I worked in the web offset area for several years. Struck out on my own as both a consultant and a software development company. And about 10 years ago, I think next year is our 10th anniversary of Colorcasters. We formed Colorcasters as primarily a color management training and consulting company.
Okay, I like it. Colorcasters, I like the name as well of that. And I guess, let's take you back to those early days. You were obviously a child, Jim, when you entered the industry 40 years ago, but take you back to those days. And you had this specific idea, didn't you, about making color measurement and therefore management easier?
I don't know about right away, but pretty early actually. So in somewhere in the middle of my college education at RIT, I was introduced to a gentleman from 3M, and his name escapes my brain at the moment. And he had a piece of software that ran on a Radio Shack Model 100, if anyone knows what that is, and connected to some early densitometers. And I will be honest with you, I was probably 20 or 21 years old at the time, and I saw that, and I was like, yeah, I'm locked in. This is where I want to be in the industry. And strangely, 40 years later, I'm still here, and the journey it's been to watch from those early days when everything was really just densitometers and CMYK densities to what we do today in this industry is really pretty amazing.
And how did you get into that? I mean, I always ask this question of people that come on. If they're an engineer, they typically played with Lego when they were a kid. Most of what we are interested by, fascinated by, starts at a very early age. So although the specifics of that come later in life, understandably. But what's the one key thing, do you think, that makes you so interested in color?
So, believe it or not, it does go back to what we call middle school in the U.S. And I think I was in the 7th grade, and this is back when shop classes were a big thing. And our shop had a printing area, which consisted of 2 platen presses and drawers and drawers of California job cases full of movable type. And I was fascinated by the process of setting type and then, printing notepads with my mom's name on them one at a time in a California job case, or I'm sorry, in a platen press. And I loved it. I thought it was really cool. And then when it was time to take an elective as a freshman in high school, I have 4 older siblings, and one of them said, "Hey, you could take the graphic arts class." And I'm like, "Why?" He goes, "Well, I remember how much you liked printing on the platen press." He goes, "This is really cool. They have offset duplicators." And it was. I was fascinated even more in the bigger. Once you got out of that entry level class, you could go into the lab. In the lab, we had Davidson presses, one color, and we had a process camera. And so we did some 4-color printing and some 4-color silk screen work, in my teens. And then I found out about RIT, that I could get a degree in printing management, and yeah, the rest is history. And it's all about education. I mean, I was put in a position in the education system where I could pick up this interest. And personally, I feel that our society in the U.S. lacks that now. The trades don't get the same exposure at the early age that I did, and I think you're right. Those are your formative years, and you start to go, hey, I have a natural ability at this. It just makes
Mhm.
sense to me. And I've also been really fortunate because I've loved technology and computer programming from about that same age. And so I was able, and as you know, color has become all about software and numbers and math. And that's really one of my strengths. And so in our company, I'm the technical guy, right? I mean, if it's somehow broken, if the software's not working right, the RIP computer's not working right, something like that, the instrument's not connecting, I'm the guy who's going to solve that problem. And then on the other side of our company, we've got Shelby, and she comes from the newspaper and the design side. And so when you put those two skill sets together, I think it makes color almost fun, quite frankly.
There we go. There we go. And it has to be, these things that are passions in life, whatever they are, is driven by, excitement, education, but fun as well. And it's not a dirty word in the print industry, fun, is it?
It can be, but the people I know who have stuck around as long as I have and longer, um, all say, when I run into them at the print shows and other things, they all say to a person that I wouldn't be here if I still wasn't having fun. And
Yeah.
and so, I've got many friends a decade or more older than me who are still working, which is well past the retirement age in the U.S. And and they're having fun, and that's why they're doing it. And so it encourages me that I found. It took me a little while to find that path. I mean, it was about 10 years ago when we started Colorcasters that I really felt like I was where I wanted to be my whole career, and it's part of why I have no plans to stop anytime soon. But the bigger reason I have to stop no time soon is that I feel the level and breadth of color knowledge that a guy like me has. There's several of us, but there's a bunch of us who, when we do ultimately leave the industry and retire, whatever that means, uh, we're going to leave a void in the industry if we don't right now do everything we can to literally give away for what was given to us so freely throughout our entire career. Even though those people were paid and we were paid, but the exchange of knowledge is always something that people do freely. If I don't do the same thing now that was done for me, George Lida, that's the guy's name from 3M. George Lida, when I was 20 years old, freely he gave me his functioning software and said, "Have at it, improve it, do whatever you want with it." And that's someone doing that. I'm trying to do the same things now. Yes, I get paid, and yes, I make a decent living in this industry. But to me, it's far more important at this point in my life to make sure that others can do that behind me.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very noble cause as well, Jim. And, as I keep saying to my wife, you only retire from something if you don't like what you're doing. You do like what you're doing, why would you stop? So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think you're very wise. And I guess that's the perfect precursor to our chat today, really, all about G7 and iLearning. Because you're closely involved, obviously, in that. Everybody knows that with Colorcasters. So give me a typical example. You walk onto the floor of a print shop, and how do you explain to a typical print partner, what G7, what iLearning can do for them? What's your opening sort of pitch?
So those two things are going to be, while they're connected, the pitch is going to be slightly different. If
Yeah,
it's
sure.
G7 and now G7 Plus, I'm going to go in and I'm going to say, look, even if you don't intend to become a master print facility and go through that certification process, this is still an important technology. We refer to it as both a method and a specification. And it's still important because we need to dial in your equipment, whether it's an offset press or some kind of a digital press. We need to dial these all into a common target, or what we refer to as a common known good print condition, right? And a known good print condition, many people are familiar where you are with Fogra, and in the US with Grackle. So in the US, we like Grackle 2013 as our known good print condition, and G7 Plus is the method that we use to achieve the Grackle 2013 color specification as closely as we can, but some equipment can't get there. And there's, that's what the education is all about. When when you dial everything in and you show them a report and the report doesn't say pass with flying colors, right? It's like, oh, it only passes grayscale, and I want it targeted. And so in G7 Plus, we have what I like to refer to as good, better, and best. Grayscale is the minimum requirement to be part of the G7 Plus program. And then you can get targeted, which means, yeah, I can hit the outside edges of Grapple 2013 or some other named color space. And then color space means I can hit that entire color space very accurately. And so when you aren't hitting color space, someone's like, why can't I hit color space? It's like, well, because your ink system, UV flatbed, for example, isn't capable of it, right? With the printer and the inks you have, you can't get that big a gamut. It's not a bad thing. We can still get grayscale, and you're still going to print very well. And your hues are going to be the same as the hues coming off the offset press. So while they may have more chroma, more saturation than you in some areas, you're going to have potentially higher detail because of your resolution, things like that. And you have to play the game of explaining the benefits of the two systems because they're different.
Yeah. And I guess that. Sorry, Jim, carry on.
Well, when it comes to iLearning Plus, so iLearning Plus is primarily an online learning platform, which is part of Printing United. And it is the thing I love about iLearning Plus is that the number of instructors there now, I don't even know the number, but I think it counts in the dozens, have contributed content to that platform. I have, my business partner Shelby has, many people I know have, and so we contribute a course or a module of a course. And so instead of just getting one person at the front of the room droning on about the topic, you can go through the iLearning Plus catalog and you can say, hey, I want to learn about dye sublimation profiling, right? And that would be me, right? That would be me. Or I want to learn about offset press calibration, and that would be a different person, right? I want to learn about estimating. I want to learn about HR issues. I mean, literally, whatever it is in the print industry, from one end to the other, there's probably an iLearning course about it. And then the other thing is they're very committed right now to keeping them up to date. So Shelby was part of the Color Management Professional Fundamentals course, the original version of it when it came over, it got under one roof. And that was about 2.5 years ago, and they just updated and refreshed it. And that one, they made some major changes because it needed some major changes. Other courses just get very minor tweaks. And so they're constantly updating. Some of the courses in iLearning Plus are part of a certification track where you get a nice digital badge that can go on your website or in your email signature. And some of them are just purely informational, and you sit through them and you learn and you become better educated. And so, it's the best part about it is it's on demand, online. You can start and you can stop. A great example, very fresh in my mind, is I teach the G7 Plus Expert Training course, which can be taken online as part of iLearning, at self-paced. It can also be taken live online with an instructor like me, or it can be taken in person. And so the last 2 weeks, I've had the pleasure of leading online courses. Those are 3 days long, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And as part of that course, you gain access to the Color Management Professional course. And while we don't call it a prerequisite, because I guess there's reasons we can't, we highly suggest and recommend strongly that you take that course before you come attend the in-person training. And if you haven't, we again recommend, once you're there, don't take the certification exam for G7 Plus until you've taken and passed the one for CMP, because odds are we have statistics that show you probably won't pass the G7 test without having taken CMP, right? And so the in-person G7 program, even though you can do it online, does tie in very tightly with iLearning, to the extent that when we teach it in person, they have a login to get access to program materials for the course. That is where they actually go take their test. It is an online test. And so even if they aren't taking the course there, self-paced, they are still exposed to the iLearning platform. So the iLearning platform has become, for me, a single go-to location for education in the print industry right now.
Yeah, and especially internationally, Jim, because You know, in person, we know in person is great. I think if you ask any human being which they prefer, in person or online, they would say in person. And then there's the practicalities of life. And I guess as iLearning has grown, and even I've taken it, and even I passed. It's the first thing I've passed educationally for about 40 years, Jim. You know, in the sense, but it's so accessible, any time zone, any time of day, as long as you wish, for as long as you wish. For, you know, you can break up your own time into that. I think it's a brilliant solution to a problem that the industry has talked about for so many years. How do we educate people? And you know, and you can only have that conversation so many times before you actually have to do it. And for me, iLearning has come along just at the moment in time where we're all a little bit more you know, open-minded to learning online. So I guess that's helped the international expansion as well, hasn't it?
Well, right, because the other thing is when you go to industry events and you get together with the industry, you know, quote unquote leaders, the common thread when it comes to education is we have a gigantic skills gap right now.
Mm.
And some of that falls to our technical colleges, right? Which were not properly supported by the industry as the conventional, like offset, Flexo, as though like this Flexo hasn't contracted as much, but as offset and web offset contracted so massively, um, the support for those technical colleges almost evaporated. And those
Mm.
technical colleges and you know, the unions just had union schools, and at least in the US, where freshmen could be trained. Those are all gone. And so if we don't fill those knowledge gaps and really the educational opportunity gaps, then we're going to continue to have in the US, and I'm sure it's worldwide, real problem hiring at both, you know, not just the entry level, because I don't consider a pressman entry level, right? But if we can't have quality pressman on offset presses, because I don't see offset going away anytime soon. It's smaller, but it's still there. You know, quality flexo operators, quality people who can still run screen equipment, because screen printing is not going away either. I mean, it's still the most efficient way. If you need 1,000 t-shirts, there's no better way to do it yet. Um, and and then let's talk about where I spend most of my life, which is inkjet, right? So, you know, as we get into, you know, dye sublimation printing, whether it's, you know, small desktop machines or machines that fill a room and are used to, you know, print on fabric, or well, transfer to fabric for use in trade show booths, or gigantic flatbed UV machines like I'll be working on later this week that are printing, let's just call them environmental components of buildings. You know, it's like if there aren't people who can run that equipment and also understand how color works, then we have a real problem, right? Because,
Mm.
and that's where I know it's a problem. And the reason I know it's a problem is I built an entire consulting practice around it. You know, I mean, yes, I love training and I love educating, but you know, I like eating too. And so, I built this consulting practice around the fact that we don't have enough people who understand color. I mean, I go into these very big, very successful companies, and they've got a $1 million printer over in the corner, and that $1 million printer is in their head is one of the least significant pieces of equipment there, because they're making component parts of houses and industrial facilities, but they're printing things on that if they don't match the other components are failures, right? And so they don't realize they're in the printing industry, yet they are. And so I
Mm.
have to educate them on that, and then I have to educate them on color. And it can be an interesting challenge. It's also very rewarding, because one of the things I find, like in the industrial print space in particular, they love things like G7 because it's standards based. And one
Mm.
thing that anyone who manufactures widgets, right? And let's just say, I don't know, um, overhead doors for you know, dock doors, those kinds of things. Anyone who manufactures something like that has to manufacture to exacting tolerances, right? And so when you tell them, hey, we're going to use this G7 method, it has a target and it has tolerance ranges, they're like, this is great. This is exactly what we needed. We can understand, you know, and that's because you're typically brought in by the engineers because the art director has complained, right? And so now I become friends with the engineering side and the operations side, because I talk their language, which is numbers, right?
Yeah.
And then the art director comes down and I'm like, here's the reason you should probably like this better. And oh, I already can see I've got neutral grays. I love neutral grays. It's like, okay. And so it's fun when all of the knowledge and the education comes together, because one of the things as a consultant is you probably are a trainer when you're on site, whether you want to be or not. I mean, you don't always want to be, because it can be very distracting to the task. But generally speaking, you're there because they lack some basic knowledge, or just they have a gap in their basic knowledge, and you've got to help them fill that gap. Otherwise, they won't appreciate what you've done while you're there. And first of all, they won't bring you back, and repeat business is a great thing. But more importantly, they probably won't utilize it in an ongoing basis, right? And then it was, quite frankly, a waste of money for them, and a waste of time for me. I mean, yeah, I got paid, but who cares at that point? To me, it's much more exciting when I go in and help somebody, and then I get to see the results. I mean, there's nothing like that. I always love to tell the story. I worked with a very large dye sublimation printer out on the East Coast, and they brought me in because they were having some color problems, and I'd been there before, and they had some issues with a machine, and I helped them figure out the issues with the machine itself. And then, because we had to swap out a bunch of print heads, it required a new ICC profile. I helped them build that profile. And as I was leaving, I saw them printing some fabric that was going to be used in an on-set booth for a very large sporting event, right? And so they were printing for the network, and this was going to be the booth that the announcer sat in for a huge sporting event in the US. And so this is like a Wednesday or a Thursday. I sit down at home Saturday with my wife to watch this event, and there's that booth. And to be able to turn to her and go, I was part of that. because it was the right color, and they weren't getting the right color, and they were literally under the gun, and they had some real problems. And to be part of that, and see what our industry, what print can actually do, it's always a really exciting, because exciting as printing those notepads for my mother 40 plus years ago.
And that's where the job satisfaction comes, of course, isn't it? Is being able to see, however big a part you are of something that's successful and something that works, that's the job satisfaction, isn't it, right there? But you must come across, all sorts of misconceptions in your work about color from print shops. Don't name any names, but tell me what's your favorite misconception that you've come across that you've had to correct?
Oh boy, favorite misconception. That's a great question. Favorite misconception. Oh, I'm going to go with a funny one while I see if my brain comes up with other ones.
Okay.
So I've got to give credit where credit is due. As a G7 Plus expert trainer, we do occasionally go through what we call train the trainer sessions, because we want to have some consistency in the way we lead the class. And up to this point, those classes are led by Don Hutchinson, the inventor of the G7 method. And when we were going through the last G7 training, I heard him speak, and he was my instructor 10 or 11 years ago. But I just caught something different, and maybe it's something he's picked up. So as we were going through the training, we came to a slide, and it was showing a nice neutral gray, and then one that had a bit of a magenta or red hue shift, and then the same image with a bit of a cyan or a blue hue shift. And he said, and some people love to refer to these as cool gray and warm gray, when in fact they should be referred to as cool, not gray, and warm, not gray, because the only thing that's actually gray is neutral. If it's not neutral, it's not neutral, and we shouldn't use, and it's that confusion of the word, which was propagated by, we're not going to name names, but one of the color matching systems out there has in their book cool grays and warm grays. They aren't gray. They're cool something. They're cool not grays and warm not grays. And I actually, I went ha 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 when I learned it. But then as I got out in the field, I'm like, yeah, that's one of those terms that we should really try to teach people to not use, because they're misusing the word gray. And if you are trying to achieve the G7 Plus specification, which my clients are, that's based on neutral, and neutral and gray are supposed to be interchangeable words. And if we start calling something cool gray and warm gray, we're misusing the words. So yeah, it's typically things like that, though. Those are the kinds of misconceptions that I run into, is people just misusing terminology and misunderstanding terminology.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I was going to say that person went on to write the famous book 50 Shades of Non-Grey, which of course was a worldwide smash, as we know. So, listen, Jim, we're coming to the end of our time here on Print Island today, and I'm just curious. It's been fascinating listening to you, really about what the programs offer G7 Plus, particularly in iLearning. How does somebody get into it? What would you say is day one, page one? How does somebody want to take part in G7 Plus? How do they get into it?
It's actually, it's become fairly easy. You just go to iLearningPlus.org, which is the letter I, learning, the word plus.org. And at that point, you would be a non-member Printing United, so you're going to pay slightly higher prices. In the case of G7 Plus, you're going to pay a much higher price. So my next recommendation is to jump over to printing.org and join Printing United either as a company or an individual to get the savings, because if you're going to go down the iLearning path, and most people who find it do attend more than one class. I mean, you've been through it. And it's so easy.
Yeah. It is.
And I recommend if you really think you want to be a G7 Plus expert, then sign up for G7 Plus and get that quote unquote free access or included access in the G7 Plus tuition for the CMP program, because otherwise you have to pay for the CMP program separately. And it is one of the more expensive, other than G7, which is in a different price range. It is one of the CMP class is one of the more expensive ones because it has a certification component behind it. And so if you're going to go down the certification path, just sign up for G7 right away, G7 Plus, and then decide. Then you have to decide what kind of learner you are. There are some people who do great with the online self-paced. I think personally, for me, trying to do G7 Plus as a self-paced online learning program might have been challenging. I'm not saying I wouldn't have been successful at it. It wouldn't have been my first choice. My first choice for that course in particular is in person. And I've done it as an instructor. I have led it both in person and live online. I feel like I get better engagement and better retention from the folks who show up in person. So my recommendation is, if you have the time and the space in your life, try and do G7 Plus live in person. If you can't, that's fine. The online courses are great as well. We teach those a little differently. It's done over 5 days, Monday through Friday, 4 hours a day. So the nice thing about that is if you're running a small business and like taking 3 days out plus travel on both ends, that can be very disruptive to a small business. If you're the chief technical officer and you're doing this, now you can sit at your desk 4 hours a day and still run your business the other 4 hours a day.
Sure.
Which a lot of people like that. It's still a great way to learn. I'm selfishly, I love to teach it that way because I don't have to leave my house. But yeah, I mean, that's the way to start. iLearningPlus.org. Look at the catalog of courses. You will be amazed. Go to the instructors page and look at the variety of experience that we as a group have. I mean, that also, we've got HR people in there. We've got accountants in there. We've got customer service people. We've got sales people. We've got technical people like me. Whatever you need, it's probably there. And that's the first thing. Just go look at iLearningPlus.org. And if you like what you see, G7 Plus is there. Color Management Professional is there, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Yeah.
Fabulous. Listen, Jim, you've been a wonderful guest today. Thank you for taking the time to join me here on Print Island. It's been fabulous to hear all about the iLearning program and G7 Plus from, listen to the teacher. I never used to listen to the teacher when I was at school. This is the most learning I've done in the majority of my adult life, I have to say. But thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure to meet you, and enjoy the rest of your summer, sir.
All right. Thank you so much, Richard. It was a pleasure being here.